All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is February 22nd, inching closer to summer here in Newport, Rhode Island, and elsewhere around the world, I guess. But we've got a small crew today. I think Peter Eisler is still stuck out in the desert playing with horses, I believe. So not quite sure who it is. And Steph Robles over in Europe. She was going to join us, but it depended on her training day. So I wanted to check in with her. Anybody heard what's happening? There was at one point in time, there was all this Olympic sailing happening in Spain and Portugal, and I haven't heard boo. How about you guys? Gary?
Quiet.
All right. Well, hopefully.
I know I'm getting requests to come and work with people in various different Olympic groups over there, and of course I can't do it because they won't let me out of the country unless it's for a U.S. purpose. But it's interesting to hear that there are people who are busy working hard. I think there's a pretty good group in Lanzarote, doing a lot of sailing out there, and then there's other people spread around the Med and parts of Spain. So there is some going on. I don't know. I'm sure
the Portugal regatta comes up in March, and the three teams are a couple points apart, and whoever the U.S. is qualified for women's 470. The question is which of those three. But if they don't have a regatta, it's determined.
All right. So we'll hopefully hear from Stephanie next week. We're going to pin her and see if she can come and give us a lay of what's happening over there. So in the meantime, before we get to the Cup, Jonathan, you cross country to do some sailing in Florida. And Ed apparently was out coaching you guys, but you weren't listening to him. But what was the event, and how'd that play out?
Yeah, it was the third in the series of Davis Island J70 events. And, they've gradually become a little bit more official. It was originally just sort of training, and maybe we'll write down some scores. Now we're actually keeping score. But there is still a really strong sort of training and learning aspect to these events. It's been very well organized primarily by Ed Furry with Sail 22. So there's been on the water coaching for the whole group organized by Greg Fisher. There's been some excellent drone footage that's been put together by Mr. Ingham. And they've been doing Zoom debriefs. So I think it's been a great opportunity to go sailing, to go racing, but also to have it be so that everybody's learning more than you would in a normal event, probably.
Before we get to the on-water stuff, I mean, you've been transiting the country a few times now. Maybe for those who are, I guess, on the cusp, we feel like things are about to sort of kick off again in a small bit of normalcy, but and the travel part, how has it been for you in terms of like testing and dealing with the team that you're working with and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my strategy has been to test when I come home. This like the most risk activity I do probably is, flying to these events and taking part. And, we try to be super careful in the way that we interact both within our team and with the other people, and, really careful with how you manage the travel. So far, so good, and been able to do it safely. But it makes you a little nervous for sure. Last thing you want to do is bring that back to your family.
Yeah,
David, it's interesting because I just experienced the event from watching in the powerboat on Saturday, but they made a big effort to ask people on the radio, to remind them on the radio to clean up and move off the dock as fast as they could, so they weren't around each other quite as much. And people did really spread out as soon as they got in. And then if you had projects to do on your boat or something, to wait until the dock kind of cleared out and then go back, rather than just everybody staying around their boats and socializing. And, and a few people went to the outdoor bar, and a few people went out back to their hotels, and some other people had a few projects, and there were little sort of camps around the club area with people talking, but it was mainly within their own team, that type of thing. So it was nicely done. And with these, as we've talked about in the past, these robot marks, Ed Furry was basically just sitting in the lounge chair in his powerboat at anchor, and he would move the mark. I mean, he had a powerboat here, and he would have a starting mark here, and then he would move that mark up the course where there was another buoy, so they'd have a gate. And then when it was time to finish, he'd just take one of those marks and move it right back to set up with the powerboat. He was calling course changes from the powerboat, and the little buoys would just motor themselves over to the new position. And that was really cool. And so there wasn't a lot of extra volunteer people needed or anything like that. And it gets everybody on the water without being too risky.
Yeah. I was thinking about that recently because, I mean, yeah, the Markset bots are great for these sort of simple one class events where we're kind of inching towards, Charleston Race Week is still, sort of moving ahead, I guess. And, we've got the Nude Regatta as our first one, San Diego in March. And so, yeah, I mean, we're bringing back a little bit of the reliance on our race committee volunteers, and we're sort of slowly inching back, and it'll be interesting to see.
Well, it's going to be good to see the first time that an event uses two different colors of buoys for two different fleets on the same course, and then they push the wrong button when they change the course direction. The buoys cross over. But it seems to be working, and it's kind of nice to watch the technology function.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yep. So speaking of masks and COVID, it was definitely interesting to see at least the interviews down in Auckland of the return of masks and I guess the end of the dirty politics. And I will sort of put myself out there that I think the Italians were sort of unfairly treated over this sort of bizarre week of what do you call that? Gamesmanship, I guess. But hey, the schedule is the schedule, as they said. If they were out practicing, they can go racing. And like the rest of us have learned, nobody's in the village, nobody's watched racing, and the racing happened, right? So what were your thoughts?
The Italians' comments are the kind of things you do in the back room and when you have a meeting with just the teams, not playing out in the press. It doesn't look good in the event. And, clearly Ian Murray and the race organizers are struggling with what the government's dictating. It's a tough situation, but to air that out in public, I don't think was helpful.
Yeah, there was a lot of dirty laundry in there, wasn't there? Both sides.
Yep, they were angry, but they could have done it in the back room and come to some kind of accommodation easier than air it out in the papers.
It also happens in every America's Cup, though. It's a part of the game.
Really? Is that right, Jonathan?
Well, I wouldn't have said that.
You didn't. He did.
Yeah.
All
right. I wouldn't have predicted that the Italians would have won 7-1. That surprised me.
Yeah, interesting racing. It was good to see that it got close there, towards the end. But like we said last week, it just sort of highlights that, the slicker, smoother, and slightly faster boat won the event. And nice job to Luna Rossa. They did a great job. I have to say that just watching, as you say, it's interesting how the rule changes that, that are obviously done because the boats are so fast and delicate and so forth. But that they make the racing different. No match race have I ever done where you could start over the starting line and just keep going. And imagine if that race where Ineos tacks and crosses Luna Rossa before the start, and Luna Rossa was turning up the whole time, and then tried to flag him and it didn't work, which was the right call. But then Luna Rossa goes over the line early. And yet on the next cross, the rest of the race is set up because Luna Rossa now is just fast enough to come back and win. But imagine if they'd had to return and start like every other sailing race that we do, the advantage that Ineos would have had, maybe that race would have gone differently. And the race previous, when both boats were over, maybe those races would have gone differently with a different rule, but that's the rule they play in under. It's just interesting to see that it's different.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was thinking that yesterday, that it's somewhat in a similar way of the previous race where the double penalty with Ineos, and there's sort of this confusion of whether it was scrubbed or not, and this and that, and yeah. So by being OCS was, Luna Rossa, did they, gain an advantage with a good clean start at full speed versus Ineos who has to tack away and go?
Well, the other thing that's happening, when there is a boat that gets a penalty, and I mean, in the one sense, you can see that the Luna Rossa guys have really thought about this situation a lot, and they say, okay, if the other boat that we're racing gets a penalty, we're going to start doing maneuvers to keep the boats close together, so that the other boat has to give up more distance. But when Luna Rossa was penalized and Ineos was the boat sailing clear, they just sailed off, and they didn't take the opportunity to push over and get close and make Luna Rossa have to give up more while bringing the action close together. So that, I guess that's just either they didn't think about it well enough, or they really felt like they just weren't fast enough to get into that hand-to-hand combat, and they were hoping for a big gain on the one side.
So
Yeah, that was a mistake for sure. I agree.
My one point here is leading up into the races against New Zealand now. Luna Rossa has had a series against American Magic. Now they've had the series against Ainsley, and as pointed out, the races did get better and somewhat closer. Does all that racing help them be better and better than New Zealand? New Zealand's been off on the side. I'm sure they're analyzing everything as much as you possibly can, but they haven't had any real racing. So I just wonder if those two regattas are going to be the difference for Italy or not. We'll find out.
I think the one thing that works against Luna Rossa is because of the measurement rules, they haven't been able to try different equipment during this series. They've been locked into their foils, for example. Whereas, the Kiwis have been able to continue to advance their development. I think the racing skills of Luna Rossa have certainly improved, probably more than the Kiwis could have during that time. But, have they made their boat as fast as the Kiwis?
And Luna Rossa has improved for sure by racing. But if you think back to the 21 years ago when they did this last time and they raced against America One in the final, it was just every race was a brutal bash fest where they just they were breaking kites, they were luffing, they were penalties, there was all kinds of jumping up and down. And when they finished that series, you really kind of got the feeling that they were ready for the battle. This time maybe it's different because they've been racing, but not in a really close fashion for most of the time.
Well, it's one of the things that I want to watch closely to see if it made a difference or not. And that the bet when Luna Rossa got up against New Zealand that year, New Zealand was so much faster. It was almost a non-event after that unbelievably great racing. Torben Grail and John Kostecki battling wits there as tacticians. That was really something that year.
Yeah, but of course the course in that event made it so that a faster boat did have a significant advantage because there was open, it was 9-10 minutes to the ley line after the start. Now you're 40 seconds to the ley line, and still the faster boat has an advantage, but it's taken away if they make mistakes very quickly. So interesting to see. This is going to be, you say Burling, tremendous sailor, obviously, but the amount of match racing time is limited compared to Spithill. They're trying to work it out in the simulator and talking on the chalkboard and stuff, but there's only so much you can do, and you need to have that other boat right next door to you to really find out what your capabilities are, and they haven't had that in the way that Luna Rossa has.
Well, the last time we saw Spithill Burling in Bermuda, Burling looked pretty good. But then again, at the Christmas regatta, Burling did not look too flash on the starting line and seemed to be behind, but yet he won 5 out of 6 races.
Right. And remember, the difference here is that we're now starting upwind where you can get an advantage off the start more significantly. And in Bermuda, you're starting on a reach and then going on to a run, which limited the amount of advantage the leader had. So
I like the upwind start a lot better. I think for this event, it's a good change from the reaching start to the upwind start.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is just looking at it, stepping back and looking at it big picture. You know, Rossa's been doing this game for what now, 20 years, right? Same with Team New Zealand. You know, and both Ineos and American Magic are essentially new teams. And it's not that they can't assemble good sailors, good engineers, good designers. I'm sure there's good management all around, but it just shows you how hard this game is. And I just wonder if that little bit of sort of organizational history has helped out those top two teams.
I'm sure it has.
I'm sure it has too. Interesting though that this is one of the few times, and Gary, you would know this better than I, but this is one of the few times that I know about where the challenger of record actually came through and became the challenger. And how much of that had to do with their team working with New Zealand in the early stages to develop the rule and to develop the whole process that they're under. You know, was that an advantage that had carried through to now?
It probably did, although the Italians were at the New Zealanders' throat. I mean, there was one challenge and arbitration thing after another. You know, I kind of wonder if that was an effort to keep the Kiwis off balance over the months leading up to it.
Well, I want to just quickly go back to the match racing thing because it's kind of funny. Like, I mean, you don't really associate Jimmy Spindle as a match racer either. I mean, Bermuda and IODs was a long time ago, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these guys, none of them driving the boats have a ton of recent match racing experience, right? And in match racing AC75s, none of them do until now, right?
Yeah, but if there's one guy that you would be in fear of in a match racing starting line, it would be Jimmy, in my view.
I mean, he's been good for a long time on that starting line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. The traditional match racing experience, does it really matter at this point where the boats are, you know, the thing is so methodical and it's different, you know, in a lot of ways that how much does that really matter?
Well, I tell you, watching these races, I over and over again, I was saying, you know, oh, there's a mistake because in a normal match race, it was a mistake and it was a mistake here too. Or there's a strong move and in a normal match race, it was a strong move and it still is here. You can just, you know, you can see it. And one of the things that's important now at the speeds that they have to make decisions at is that just having that instinctive feel of what is right and wrong based on all your match racing experience has to be a big deal. So I think it does correlate, and I'm glad to see that it does, because I think that that's one of the really fun things about the America's Cup experience is that, you know, is that match race feel of it.
Yeah, I think it's you know, if you go back on board and you watch the Luna Rossa live, you know, on the NBC, it is really fascinating how quickly things happen, you know, once the decision is made, if you really in and you know, to your point is, you know, maybe that's where a big part of it is being able to, you know, commit to it and do it as you want versus having to, you know,
classic example is when it's light breeze, and it may not seem like it's light watching it on TV, but when these guys are struggling to stay on their foils, you know, when it's light breeze, you lead back as a match race. And each time that happened, the leading boat coming back had a strong start. And when the breeze is up a bit more, you tend to push back a little bit, you know, because it's harder to kill speed going towards the line for that boat that's leading back. And in fact, that's what happened here. And the boats that were able to do that were successful. So, I mean, there's just little things like that that are simple, that are basics of match racing that are showing up time and time again, and even in these races.
You know, the one shot I like the best is when you're down low on the water, so we can get a sense of the chop and wind on the water, where these aerials, you know, it just looks so placid all the time. But on the water, you can see the breeze better.
Do you think getting back to the Brits and, you know, coming close but not quite there, I mean, do you think Ainsley took on too much in the management and organization of that team? I mean, he basically put it together, you know, hired the people, found the money. You know, from what I understand, he was integrally involved in all areas of the campaign. And okay, he is a god. Don't get me wrong, probably the greatest small boat sailor, of our generation. But is it just too much for one person to do all of that?
Well, and you can add Terry Hutchinson to that list too.
Yeah. So some of the same arguments could apply there.
It is a lot. And when you look back on the more recent successes where the teams have gotten incredibly complicated, through everything from engineering to sponsorship to, just training and going racing, you find that the teams that do well have two, three, four people at the top end who operate as one. And rather than just one person who is top and then delegating out underneath. It's a tremendously complicated and challenging, game at that level. Made even harder this year because of the international COVID issues. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a tough call. It feels like you can do it. And then you get done and you look back and you go, wow, it would have been nice if I had some help.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Dennis Conner and Russell Coots knew when it was their time to get off the boat when they became the managers. And luckily for Russell Coots, he had Peter Blake and Ernesto Bertelli helping him out, and later Larry Ellison, and Dennis Conner had Malin Burnham and Ed DeMoulin and Fritz Jewett. So there was kind of big guys in charge that took away a lot of details so they could just focus on the sailing. And your point, Jonathan, is good with both Sir Ben and Terry. I added Terry, but they had a lot on their plates, and sailing still counted.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think to sort of some final thought that I think in the between race interview on that last day there, where Ben admitted that, hey, the other boat's 2 knots faster. There's not much more you can do, and so. Slow boat, as everyone keeps saying, you got a hard time ahead of you, and so the decisions go back all the way, not just to Ben, but obviously the design teams and where they took them down into a certain corner of the rule, right?
I like it when it's 2 knots faster. And 12 meter, if you could find a way to get a 1/10 of a knot, a 1 degree pointing higher was a lot,
All right, so real quick, looking ahead, this is this sort of fascinating period where all the attention's been paid on everybody else, and even the word down there is just there's not much knowledge of what Team New Zealand has and what they're capable of at this point. So it's sort of this kind of, it feels like it's more unknown today than it has been any recent cup in my mind.
Yeah, it kind of falls back like it was in the 60s and 70s when the boats that got together for the first time, and that was the first time they saw each other. This is a little bit that way with the minor exception of those 4 days back in December where everybody went out on the course together. But everything's changed since then. Everyone's learned how to sail their boats better. People have changed their equipment. New Zealand has new foils that weren't in existence back then, and so. We'll see, but have they prepared correctly? Do they know their boat as well as the Luna Rossa guys do? And what wind speed are we going to have? Is it going to be lighter or breeze on, or what's happening? So we'll see.
And the information is asymmetrical. I think New Zealand knows exactly how fast Luna Rossa is because of all the data that's been available for this whole time. Mm-hmm. But Luna Rossa does not know exactly how fast Team New Zealand is.
Yep. Good point.
That's true. And of course, one of the things that I keep hearing and reading, is that, the boats were almost the same speed. I wonder why the one boat was better than the other. But what they don't tell you is that, you were going the same speed, but you're going a degree lower upwind and a degree higher downwind to get that. And that ends up eating up a lot of distance. And that's why you lose. So, that the moding of these boats has got to be a big part of what's going to make the difference in the end.
And the reliability, because there was listening super close to some of the pre-start one. There was a moment where I think it was either Giles was sort of, had, board down, and there's a pause, and he says, "Come on, board." And there is, they'll never say, but I don't think there's 100% reliability in these FTS systems across the board. we'll see. But all right. So the other top for today I want to do is, this was kind of a funny thing. I thought to share screen. Let's see, was this yeah, my wife and I both agree that, hey, that's kind of convenient that they get to win their own regatta, you know? They get to win from their own cup. In this one, you know, when I looked at that, that's kind of a weird trophy. And then you think, aha, the brilliance of these guys, that you can just slug the champagne right from that curved lip, which so yeah, it's the curved bottom of the thing is kind of weird. You can't put it down to the ground, but you got to have its base. But there you go. So they get to chug from their own coffee. I mean, their own mug there. But so that got me thinking about trophies. And so, and at the same time, this one kind of showed up on my feed here, which I thought was kind of a cool trophy. This is, Jonathan, you would like this one.
Right on.
Yeah, this was Chris Hughes. Like, it must be an Arrow one, you know. But it kind of like, man, what a pretty trophy, you know, for an Arrow. And it just sort of brought me back to kind of the cool artsy trophies that we kind of win from here to there. And so it reminded me of Jonathan McKee did a great story about Mike Martin, Adam Lowry, that's just finished in the recent issue. And there was a mention of him sailing with Brent Barbihan, which I sailed with I feel like as a kid a long time ago. And it was in St. Pete, Ed. And this trophy has been sitting around my house forever. It's very Florida-like, isn't it? You know, I think the little plaque that fell off from a long time ago, but it's one of those things where your wife says, "You want to keep that thing or not?" Yeah, man, those are like second or third of the Thistle Midwinters or something like that. It's cool, you know. So anyway,
Well, don't throw that out.
no, it's gonna just stay random collect dust. But these random trophies that we collect over the years that are not silver, all right. So
I wonder what's going to happen now with the with 3D printers coming online more inexpensively, and I wonder if that's going to make it easier to make trophies like that Arrow one that you were just showing us, which otherwise, you know, that takes a lot of work and skill and different materials and stuff. But if you had a 3D printer, you could do most of that without the colors, but you could do most of it right on the printer. That might be, you know, a new wave of types of trophies we have.
yeah, so cool trophies that we're still sitting on. Gary, you said you had one. Well, let's start with you.
Yeah, but I'm going to show you a different one. This is a trophy. This is a trophy.
Don't let him get away with that, Steve. Dave.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it there on the.
Oh, nice.
But you win the America's Cup. That was the trophy. That's been sitting in my various offices for a lot of years. So anyway, that's the cool one.
You got a
Right.
chair. You do have another one in there, right?
I do.
Show us the Emmy.
There
I'm
you
pretty
go.
sure Gary Jobson and Stan Honey are the only sailors that have ever won Emmys.
Yeah. Well, I think Ed Baird deserves one because he's pretty good at commentary.
Right.
But this one, very quick story. This was the '88 Olympics. And I was out on the race course following the Finn race, and Lawrence Lemieux, who I knew was winning that race. And if he rounded the leeward mark and sailed upwind, Lawrence was going to win that race and get a bronze medal. Very cool. Hard to do in the Finn class. And on the downwind leg, he left the course and went over to a couple of 470 sailors. They were 18 years old from Singapore. They had capsized, and he rescued them until a rescue boat came along, and he lost his bronze medal. But Lawrence was awarded the Sportsman of the entire Summer Games that year. He was also the Canadian Yachtsman of the Year, and my report on NBC, the Emmy. So
There you go.
that's how that got that.
See, sportsmanship does get you acknowledged, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Jonathan, you've got probably closets of trophies. What do you hiding there?
Well, my wife makes me clean my closets every now and then, so not as many as there used to be. I'm actually going to do two, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
One was from something called the Adventurous Cup, which happened in the fall here in Seattle. It was a charity to restore this old wooden schooner that's been around Seattle for ages. So they had this event to try to raise money for that purpose. And the trophy is one of the spikes from when they rebuilt part of the hull. There's this bronze spike that they just mounted on a very simple wooden plaque. Can you see it all right?
Nice.
So I thought that was a pretty cool way to like bring like it tied the event to the trophy. There was a real tangible connection that I thought was actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Big spike.
Second one that my wife hasn't let me get rid of yet is this one.
Yeah,
And
how about that, huh?
it's
Hold it up there. Let's take a look at that.
you think about, I forget about it for months on end, and then every now and then you pull it out and you just it just brings back so many memories of that time. And I was only 24 years old, and of everything that sort of led up to that, and just how fortuitous I was to be in that position where my friend Carl Buchan asked me to sail with him. He was by far the stronger part of our team and basically dragged us up onto the podium. And we had a regatta that was, good for us, and just it worked out. And I don't know. Nothing more to say, I guess.
Olympic gold medal is pretty strong, Jonathan.
Yeah, you got to see on that one.
Well too, right?
Yeah. The second one was special in its own way because I got to sail with my brother, and I was a part of creating that 49er class. So, that was unique in its own way, and be able to win a medal at age 40, that was special in a different way.
Outstanding. Do you keep that thing in a lockbox, or how do you make sure it doesn't get
No, I haven't really done much I don't have a lockbox, but yeah.
It hangs by the fireplace?
It stays in its box.
Nice. All right, cool. All right, Ed, I know you're in between houses, everything's packed up, but you sitting on anything?
Well, I tell you, I wish I could show it to you. One of my favorite trophies is the very, very first one that I ever got, which I was 9 years old, and it's as simple as it can be, but it's just a plaque with a opti on it. And it was winning your age group at 9 years old. It just was one of those really basic trophies that was kind of cool looking. And like your Dolphins there, we just haven't quite gotten rid of it. It's kind of fun to have it hanging in a rustic part of the house from a memory of how it all got started. No, it's good fun. Actually, it's funny that Gary mentions the '88 Olympics, because that's when my friend Allison Jolly was the first female gold medalist in the Olympics. And I was down there as a training partner for John Kostecki, and so got all the team gear. And my middle son, Ty, was coached by Allison in school for his college career. And they became friends and stuff. And then the last year he was in school, they had a Halloween night sail regatta, and you were supposed to dress up in some sort of Halloween costume. So I pulled out, I had this one piece Henry Lloyd, just really odd blue colored, foul weather gear set that was from the '88 Olympics. And it was buried deep in some box back in the closet somewhere. And I found this thing and pulled it out, and he wore it as his costume to, celebrate Allison, 30 years later. It was pretty cool. But no, thinking back on, historic things, my kids actually did a fun thing. We had these two D95, RC boats that we race around in the canal behind the house. But they said, it's kind of hard to tell which one's which. So we were trying to figure out some way to make them, noticeable. And so for my Christmas present, my kids actually went to the store and made some logos and came back with the two team logos from the 2007 America's Cup, so now we can tell the boats apart, so it's not a trophy, but it's kind of a fun thing to have around.
Cool. Which boat is faster?
It's interesting because the neighbors on the docks around our house come out and watch, and they take little bets. But the first thing they always do is not which boat, it's who's driving that boat, who's got which remote control, in their hands, because between the kids and all, there's differences. So it's kind of fun to hear them. they're starting to get used to it. And now there's a pretty strong betting pool going through the neighborhood.
Excellent. All right. Has the neighborhood fleet grown, or is it still just the two of you?
It's just the two of us right now, but there are boats in the area for sure. And I think actually one of my college roommates was sharing pictures this weekend of a big event that they had down in Fort Lauderdale with a whole bunch of these boats. So, they're around and people are enjoying them, and keeps them from having to be cooped up with no boating. So.
Nice.
Yeah. So mark my words. I think when we first talked about this, Ed said, they're just toys. I'm not going to race these things. Another month, he's going to be down there, going head to head with Bruce Farr in the Villages.
Well, now that there's neighborhood money involved, it might be.
Sponsorship.
You got a payday somehow, right? All right, Gary, we're going to have to get you on. Jonathan, same as well. And then we'll have I think maybe we can restart the yacht racing cruising Hall of Fame regatta or something like that you guys did a long time ago. So anyway, all right, we better wrap this up. Everybody have a great week. Hopefully see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
It's a pleasure.
Good week, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.